Okay,
Mm.
so Olivia Jensen,
Hello.
we are sharing this time to dive a bit into the 9-month course that we're going to be running, Earth Leadership, and just sharing a bit about what feels alive for us in this, why we're doing this, what we want to explore in it. Um, yeah, just to share a bit about my background with this. So my name is Jon Eden Khan. For anyone who isn't familiar with me or my work, I am the initiator of Singularity, which is an adventure into starting a transnational political party that's sourced in the one life at the core of the earth, all humanity and all kingdoms of nature. I founded Avatara as well, which is an international spiritual community that's dedicated to the emergence of new systems that are anchored in the one. And I do leadership work as well. I'm really passionate about working with people who are courageous and vulnerable enough to explore the next frontier and what it means to show up as a leader in the world. And yeah, and I'm really happy that I get the opportunity to collaborate with you, Olivia.
Mm.
Something that we share is a real passion for leadership and a passion for a different kind of power present in the world. So I know for me that's one of the reasons that I'm really curious to dive into our first collaboration with this.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm Olivia Jensen. I have been fortunate enough to work with you this year, so I can state firsthand the power and presence that can come through really turning our attention to dedicating ourselves to soul-driven leadership. And my interest in this field and working with leadership comes from having had a corporate background in central government in the UK and also in New Zealand, and really seeing where, despite many people's best intentions, there is such a schism around power and leadership and hierarchy and the way that the world does um, power and bringing what should be good things forward into the world, but sometimes it falls flat because there's just so many different layers as to why our current society isn't able to bring forward more soulful projects or things that really benefit collective awakening and humanity. And that's at the core of my work, really, is this sense of freedom and collective awakening, which I feel myself very dedicated to. And I am a leadership mentor. I work with soul emergence and transitions, supporting people through times of crisis, biggest soul initiations and awakenings. And I'm also a tantric body worker and feel very attuned to the embodiment path as well. Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be creating with you as well. I'm really excited for what we have in store. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's good for us to just presence ourselves with why we're doing this. And so just before I jumped on this call with you, I watched a video by a guy called Peter Zayan. I don't know if you've ever heard of Peter Zayan, but he's an expert in geopolitics, and he's one of those human beings where when I watch him, I'm like, how does someone like that just function? Like, how does someone like that who understands the intricacies of the global system and how it's all playing together and what's going on, how does someone like that just function, basically? And yeah, he was making this video about him acknowledging the possibility of a next Gulf War that is a possible eventuality because of the interconnected web of crises that are going on with Israel and Lebanon and Gaza and Saudi Arabia and Iran and so on. And yeah, to me, it was another sobering moment of presence with the interconnected, wild, highly confronting global crisis that humanity's entered into. And um, yeah, to me, it feels like there's a pressure that's building within us. There's a pressure that's building within more and more beings to find how on earth I relate to the whole. Earth I relate to this planet, how on earth I relate to what's happening in the wider field of humanity. You know, and maybe 100 years ago or so, people were never exposed to the whole in the way that we are today. And yeah, we're going through a rapid acceleration as a species, and a major crisis as well in how, yeah, how we relate to this. And I think something that you and I sense, both of us, deeply, is that the crisis of this time really is calling for the emergence of a new kind of leadership.
Mm.
And that new kind of leadership has to be radically different. It has to be sourced in something different. It has to be able to manage power in a way that is different to the regular schisms and failures of integrity and missing of the mark so common in our approaches to leadership so far. It must demand a different kind of development in human beings and a different
Mm.
kind of accountability, a different kind of rigor as far as the leadership training process is concerned, and a different depth that we're sourcing ourselves in.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, in a certain way, you could say that the crisis that we collectively face now is demanding nothing less than an evolutionary shift for the human species
Mm.
in order to successfully navigate it. And I'm aware that a lot of people will hear that and or be watching the news and just will have, you know, well, we'll see, we'll see it's going to go. And yeah, we'll be inhabiting the sense of cynicism and powerlessness that's so common among us because we have this deep sense of how hard it is for change to happen.
Mm.
And yeah, I know that within that, there's always beings who are radical enough, courageous enough, crazy enough, committed enough to feel the call of life,
Mm.
to respond, and to be part of a breakthrough into a new way of doing things. And
Mm.
yeah, and I know for me, for so long, I felt like in the innermost spaces of my being, my soul is in a romance with divine power.
Mm.
It's like something in the deep places in me has been touched by what that is, and has a knowing of what that is, and can only be given to an attempt. That's my version of that thing of what are you willing to fail at forever?
Mm.
It's can only be given to an attempt to be part of us updating our relationship to power.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yes, and this idea around power and standing up in the face of civilizational crisis encourages me to think about leadership in a totally new way, which is what we're trying to call in during this course that we're running. Is there's this concept in our society of leadership being for some and not for others, and hierarchy and having to be a certain way or have reached a certain point to be able to be a leader. But I have this desire just to collapse that idea completely and invite this sense of it doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter where you are, but what does matter is the developmental stage that enough has happened inside someone's being, enough soul exists in someone's body
Mm.
for there to be this desire to reach forward
Mm.
and stand for something. And it doesn't matter what it is, but to really stand for what we know is true in the core of our being. And like you said, be willing to fail and be willing to stand and withstand, as it's said in the teachings,
Mm.
for something that really matters. And for me, that's something I feel I'm given to, is knowing that I have to play my part, whatever that may be,
Mm.
and knowing that my experiences of the corporate world, for example, before, it wasn't it. It just wasn't it. I could have climbed the ladder all the way to the top and it just wasn't it. And now I feel in a place of, okay, this is the right place. This is where I'm reaching from,
Mm.
is something that matters very deeply to me. And that's what I want to bring people into.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I feel like something for me that is really alive at the moment is around responsibility and around the dilemma and the tension that we human beings face as we relate to the world, we relate to the news, we relate to, hearing about the death of so many innocents in Gaza, or the
Mm,
deaths of so many innocents in Lebanon or Israel or Sudan, or, and what is my level of responsibility? What, the slashing of the rainforests, the pollution of our oceans, the imprisonment of the Uyghurs in China, what is my level of responsibility? And I think there's this trance that so many of us have entered into where we've felt so powerless, that there's a sense of feeling so powerless and so unable to produce change that we have incubated ourselves. We've kind of quarantined ourselves in some sense of very limited levels of responsibility, that are spiced with compassionate feelings and empathy for those who are suffering, thoughts and prayers every
mm,
time some horrendous thing happens. And at the same time, not much changes.
mm,
And so many of the crises and the most embedded and contracted kind of patterns in our collective society rooted in fear and separation and survival are just on and on and on and on.
mm,
And yeah, I just find myself passionate about, okay, well, where is the space that I can rightly take responsibility for the whole? And
mm,
something that I've really been tuning into is it's true, as personal selves, it isn't right for that to be the place where I try and take responsibility for the earth. And we all know the story of people, we've been there ourselves, or we've seen people who try and take responsibility
mm,
for too much at that level, and it can be crushing, whether through
mm,
fear or panic or some kind of savior complex, like, wait a minute, I'm responsible for the world and I have to
mm,
change everything now. And we know that doesn't go well and produces
mm,
distortions. And I feel like there is a deeper level, well, the journey of responsibility in terms of our personal self is to have a really clear sense of what we are responsible for and what we're not responsible for.
mm,
And there's a lot of us who go through an important and healthy process of recognizing the things that I'm not responsible for.
mm,
Actually, I need to release my sense of my responsibility for those
mm,
things and rightly accept the things that I am.
mm,
I think, like, when people connect more deeply to their soul, then they start to recognize that their soul has already taken responsibility to bring more love into the world in some
mm,
way. And that can be in terms of just my own frequency and the field of me, where some
mm,
part of me has taken responsibility to bring more love or vulnerability or
mm,
self-care into some aspect of my being.
mm,
And as a soul grows, often there's some wider field of evolutionary change in some particular field that matters to
mm,
all of us, that a soul has
mm,
taken responsibility for.
mm,
But the place that I feel like I can feel we're gonna go, and I want this course to go, is that deep monadic core, that deep indestructible essence in the core of our being that has already taken responsibility for the
mm,
entire,
mm,
because it's one with the entire earth.
mm,
It's the life that vibrates in the core of us there is one with the life that vibrates through oceans and through deserts and through mountains and through all other cores and through the entire life that is living and breathing as one heartbeat through this
mm,
planet. And I can feel, for me, that I'm fascinated and called into a leadership that can source itself there, because we need beings who
mm,
can take responsibility for the earth today. That is actually essential. It is necessary. I increasingly do not know any way that we're going to be able to navigate what we're collectively facing unless more and more and more beings take responsibility for the entire earth,
mm,
but that they need to do so from a place that's healthy,
mm,
not from a place that is an overstretch and savior complex manifestation of their, terrified, anxious personal self, not from a place that's overstretching their soul's capacity to show up and serve, but is connecting to a place that's already said yes to that
mm,
responsibility because it's one with the life of the whole
mm,
already.
mm,
So, yeah, I get that for a lot of people that might sound beyond what they're familiar with, and that's, part of my work is bringing the deep initiations and mysteries of the spiritual traditions and mystery schools into how we do the world,
mm,
whether
mm,
we do politics or how we do leadership and so on.
mm,
I guess, what I want to come through our offering here is an affirmation that there is a place in the core of all of us
mm,
that is already vibrating as and
mm,
with the one through all things.
mm, mm,
And that's the place that we can not just take responsibility for the whole, but we can access the power to be able to show up for it in the
mm,
circumstances of our own
mm,
life.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I can feel that I want to go down a few kind of rabbit holes from there, but one is around this idea of clean power,
Mm,
and that in the same way as you're speaking to responsibility not necessarily being something that the personal self takes on and then has to become an activist and bitter and is
mm,
underpaid, and all the things that happen when good people have good intentions and try and take on too much and get burnt out, which is what we see everywhere.
mm,
Um, but this sense of spiritual responsibility, which is like stepping forward
mm,
to claim what actually is already there in a sense of destiny.
mm,
And what I see a lot of our course doing is actually helping people take that step and working with the things that might be in the way, the layers that might
mm,
be a challenge to that happening. And on a really practical level, what that can look like is very deep personal healing. It
mm,
can look like soul work, and it can look like opening up to the one that we already know that we are on some level.
mm,
But I think there's layers. So, from an esoteric perspective, um, yes, let's go there. And also, I'm wanting to encourage people to know that all the facets of who we are as humans is also part of the process.
mm,
And the more we unpeel the layers, the more we can access the depth of what already is with
mm,
regards to who we already are, but also what our responsibility is. And I'd also love to speak into clean power a little bit. I talked at the beginning about what I saw in my career, and despite wonderful people and good intentions, there was just such distortion, and it broke my heart at such a young age.
mm,
And what I've learned over time through my path is the frequency of clean power doesn't belong to anybody. And the people who hold the most power are the people that are gentle with it. They know actually what responsibility
mm,
lies in holding that amount of power, and it's held humbly
mm,
and gently and loosely, because it can be taken away, because it's actually just an energy that moves through us.
mm,
And the closer we are to alignment of truth, the more power comes in. And I think maybe all of us can sense that when we need to course correct a little bit, that's when things start to schism and not feel quite right.
mm,
So that's something I also feel will reveal through our course is supporting people to continue to refine the alignment of what we're actually really serving,
mm,
what we're taking responsibility for. And it's not a simple process, but in some ways it really is, because it's just about, yeah, I guess course correcting, and
mm,
things start to reveal.
mm,
In my experience of working with the dark or working with monadic energy, is things start to reorder naturally in life, where I'm at a point now where I feel like I can only do purity, because whatever's untrue just doesn't happen anymore, or it's not happening. And that's quite a relieving place.
mm.
It takes a lot away, a lot of the worry of what do I need to do and where do I need to go, because it becomes quite obvious it's here.
Mm, mm.
Mm,
Yeah, I really like that. Um, Pure power, clean
mm,
power. And it's right for us to bring in the part of what we're doing here is leveraging the best approaches to personal development, soul work, healing, masculine, feminine integration, embodiment, trauma work, and so on that we've been able to connect to
mm,
not just support people to connect to pure power and have that move through them in a way that isn't about them being in a position of authority or having someone given them permission to be in power, but is about power as a living frequency of
mm,
source that's moving through them. Not
mm,
just that, but we really want to support people to build vehicles to actually unfold and develop themselves in a way that can sustainably express that, can
mm,
sustainably hold that. And
mm,
that means facing ourselves. It
mm,
means learning to heal in the places that need healing and
mm,
coming home to ourselves, making peace with ourselves,
mm,
back to love with ourselves so that we're not
mm,
at war with ourselves when
mm,
power comes.
mm,
Yeah. And
mm,
I feel like that's, you know, it's like I just tune into who are those beings? Who are those beings who are going to be up for this? And to me, it's about the spirit of adventure. I
mm,
just really feel the spirit of adventure. And I feel like why would someone why would someone be turned on by the possibility that the power and love and creative fertility of the one that lives and breathes through everything is alive in their core? It's like, what, how fucking amazing. Like how amazing
mm,
is that that actually that there is a place in me that that depth of divinity, that depth of power, that depth of love, that depth of creativity that has me open to this, that as it lives through everything exists. Like what a profound gift, what how beautiful, what a
mm,
resource. And that
mm,
that actually can be where I source myself and where I take the adventure
mm,
of showing up in this
mm,
extraordinary time. Because the way I
mm,
think about it is like, okay, this is a time of insane, terrifying global crisis that every
mm.
day. And I remember I saw this internet meme a while ago. I think it was Matthew McConaughey from one of his movies, and he's like smoking a cigarette, and he just looks like he's been through a car wash 8 times. The meme was something like, you know, whatever it is, millennials after the third, you know, Earth destroying event in the last 3 years. And just, yeah, just the nature of our times is insane. And at the
Mm,
same time, if we're around now, to me,
mm,
that's an act of trust from the universe.
mm, mm,
That is like an okay, if you're alive now and you have a fire in you that has you feel like you're here to participate in some way in transformational change, what
mm,
an incredible act of trust from life that
yeah.
you're on the playing field right now. You're the
Mm,
one on the playing
mm,
field, you know?
mm,
And so yeah, like
mm,
what an adventure. What I
yeah.
the adventure of our times and to be I really often think about what I'm up to or what I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do within a multi-decade, multi-generational context. And, you know, I think about, okay, what are the conversations I'm going to have with my son when he's
Mm,
30, you know, or when he's 35 or 40, or, you know, what are the what are the snippets, the tiny little kind of glimpses that gen a generation 3 or 4, you know, times from now is going to look back on at the way people now showed up
mm,
that in a way contributed to the earliest green shoots of really significant change that
mm,
influenced the society that they inherit.
mm,
And I just think, like, wow, what an adventurous opportunity to play a role, to say yes, you know, to say yes and go on the ride of
mm,
connecting to the power of the one in me or the power of the one in you,
mm,
showing up for facing myself all the way
mm,
through, making peace with myself, healing myself,
mm,
so that I can be a vehicle for the power that wants to come through me that
mm,
isn't mine and isn't yours. You know, it
mm,
is of life itself, to
mm,
play some role, right? To play some role in contributing to humanity turning this corner.
mm,
It's, yeah, as we're facing you know, kind of life or death initiation collectively.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It is time for many of us to show up and
Time for us to show
in
up. Yeah. Yeah.
in a deeper way, because especially as much as we talk about the crisis and the things that are happening, more and more people are awakening. More and more people are bringing their personal healing to the forefront. More and more people are attempting to work through generational trauma and change. And
mm,
those of us mad and nerdy enough to be on this particular strand of the path, um, there's a resonance that can come with collating together in group. And I was feeling the phrase as you're talking, alone together. You know, so many of us are looking for community online. We're looking for our tribe. We're looking for people to vibrate with and connect with. But the journey of leadership or responsibility, or really taking a stand for what we believe in and what we're willing to really stand for, it
mm,
can be a lonely path. But actually, what I've found is coming into contact with people who are also willing and wanting to do that. There's such a rest there. There's such a feeling of being in it together without necessarily it being about physical community, but there is a monadic resonance with
mm,
certain people that are really serving the same thing.
mm,
And that can be incredibly nourishing.
mm.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a time to show up.
Mm.
And I think that's something which I would really invite, yeah, a lot of people in the fields that I'm connected to consider if they're tuning into this video is something I've seen again and again in transformational spirituality is that there are forces that get activated in us when we give our consent to manifestation that just do not
Mm.
get activated if we don't give our consent there.
Mm.
I've seen that in multiple contexts, whether it's in terms of a group of people committing themselves to a project, whether it's an individual who's um yeah, giving themselves to the manifestation, the actual on the ground manifestation of some thread of purpose that wants to come through them. But yeah, the when we give our consent to cross a threshold and fully commit to following all the way through on
Mm.
the deepest things that we can align ourselves with, it activates an entirely different level of power.
Mm.
And I know Bruce, one of our teachers and brothers, he has this story about the cafe on the edge. Have you heard that cafe on the edge thing? The cafe
I
on the edge.
don't think so.
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah, it's basically, I'll recap the cafe on the edge. So, there's people who want to, there's people who go to the edge of a cliff face and they want to jump, and they want the life force that comes from facing themselves at that level of life and death confrontation, and they want to jump and they're getting ready to jump and they're preparing themselves to jump and they're going to jump. And just before they jump, they think to themselves, actually, I should probably prepare myself a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
so they prepare themselves a bit more and they start to read books about what it means to jump. And
Have an
they,
oat flat white in the cafe.
like, after a while, they start to think, probably be good if there was a coffee shop here to support other
Mm.
people who want to best prepare themselves to jump,
Mm.
And after a while, there's a coffee shop, and then there's a library, and there's
Mm.
people gathering around, and they're having little groups where they're talking about what it means to jump and giving each other advice about how best to do it when they all eventually do jump,
Mm.
and of course, as they're all doing this, and then somebody starts to think, well, we're definitely going to jump, but just in case, we want to make sure that everyone who jumps safely. So we need to put a fence up, to make sure that no one falls when they actually mean to jump, and so on. And as they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this, occasionally there's a person who just comes through and they just jump.
Mm.
And yeah, and then, and they're never heard of again, basically, because
Mm.
who knows what happened to that person. So yeah, there's a tendency in all of us to love to go to the edge of something and then to have all kinds of very subtle avoidance strategies about really truly following through.
Mm.
And yeah, I guess a note, and I know that in myself, and there's ways that I look at that tendency in myself. And I guess the note that I want to sound as we're putting out this work is now's the time.
Mm.
now really is the time. Even if Olivia and I were not running this course, it would still be fucking time. You know,
Mm.
it's a time extraordinary, um, unprecedented, interconnected, global initiatory fire. And
Mm.
whether we do anything or not, no one can avoid the pressure that's building within them, that's demanding that they find their truth on how they are
Mm.
a member of the one humanity,
Mm.
right relationship with the one earth. And
Mm.
yeah, the message I feel like we're bringing is there's a way to navigate that in a way
Mm.
that is healthy. And if you're someone who wants to go on the adventure of really taking the risk of being a
Mm.
contributor and a leader in this type of change that's happening,
Mm.
and exploring a radically new frontier of leadership that starts with the whole and is in service to the whole in the humble circumstances of our own life, whatever,
Mm. Mm.
and there's a way to do that, you know.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah, and it's exhilarating. It's
Mm.
exhilarating, it's vulnerable, and it's actually just consenting to the process that we're all going to face at some point anyway.
Mm.
So that's a way
Mm.
I comfort myself sometimes, you know. It's
Mm.
face to face with my own, yeah, with the challenging and the hard times that come on the initiatory path. I remind myself, well, I would have had to face this at some point, and what
Mm.
really is my choice? You know, is my
Mm.
choice to delay, or is my choice to, and I know some deeper part of me is has already made the
Mm.
choice. You know, it's
Mm.
do this now. You know?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I feel like there's many other avenues we can go down, but it feels like a nice finish there. Yeah, I feel maybe this kind of gentle, soft frequency of the line of initiation is actually sometimes in the quiet moments
Oh yeah, yeah.
where something's done, said, a line is crossed, and there's not big fanfare, there's not a big story about it. It's just stepping over something that we know needs to happen. And I've witnessed that moment in many people, and I felt it in myself many times. And they've been some of the most profound moments of my life. And I haven't shared it with anybody. It's been quiet and subtle. And yet there's been this bell that sounded through my being of just knowing, okay, life isn't the same anymore. And I do believe that those of us committed to truth, meaningful lives, whatever you want to call it, there are these places in us that we know were points of no return. And yeah, it can be scary to keep moving forwards, but the price of turning back is so much bigger. And only we know. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. I feel like that's, as I've connected more deeply to my own soul over time, I feel like there have been moments where I've been allowed to see into other people's eyes and
Mm.
sense those moments, which are some of the most powerful moments where probably that person was alone in that moment.
Mm.
Probably
Mm.
maybe if they'd never told anyone, or they wouldn't know how to tell anyone about
Mm.
that moment where
Mm.
something moved in them, or something
Mm.
opened in them, or something was chosen in them, that it's extremely subtle and yet it changes everything.
Mm.
And yeah, that is a truth, you know, of the
Mm.
soul initiatory process often.
Mm.
Yeah. And we can, I mean, there's so much um loud and, you know, highly energetic transformational work that attempts to create those kinds of
Mm.
circumstances, and it's there's no substitute for it. There's no, I mean,
Mm.
you can go to loud transformational cathartic events 100 times, and if that's it's not necessarily really ripe for them to move
Mm.
across that gentle quiet inner threshold within their being
Mm.
at the time, you know. And
Mm.
yeah, so I guess that's something that we can invite people to tune into who might be interested to join this is just feel, is there some part of you that knows that it's time, that there is a threshold that you're called to cross into, in your own caterpillar to butterfly journey.
Yeah, and to be held in love in that, to be really going through that with others side by side. It's always a journey alone, but like I said earlier, this sense of alone together. Yeah, and it's a 9-month course, so it's like gestation time, you know? So maybe if it's not clear now, I think that can be a barrier, or I don't know what kind of leader I am, or I don't know what my soul purpose is, or I don't know what I'm supposed to bring forward. But what I'm finding and have found in people I work with and many of the transformational spaces I've been in is it's a spiral path. The more we personally heal, the deeper our soul lands, the more we open up to magnetic current. And it just keeps going. There's never really a finish line or a place that we get to. Maybe we can tune into the frequency of our purpose or what our soul is here to do. But it doesn't actually really matter to me what the outcome is. It will reveal, and it might not be the thing, but it's a step towards the thing. And ultimately, in my opinion, that's a step towards freedom.
Amen.
Cool. Thanks for the chat.
We'll probably do more of these.
Yeah.